She found an old photo in her dad's wallet, the edges curled and faded like whispers from another life. The sunlight catching the glossy surface, revealing a smile so familiar, yet foreign. Her fingers trembled as she traced the face beside him. A woman, whose eyes seemed to hold stories. She had never heard memories that were not hers, yet somehow stirred something deep within her. She sat on the edge of the bed, the photo clutched to her chest, the air thick with the scent of old leather and faint cologne. The room around her disappearing as her mind raced through questions that had no answers for years. She had wondered why her mother's presence was just a shadow, why her father's eyes sometimes clouded with sadness when her name was spoken. Now the pieces shifted a puzzle. She had never been allowed to see the woman beside him looked strong and tender, both fierce and gentle at once. A quiet power in her posture, a warmth in her smile that mirrored her own, in ways she had only glimpsed, in mirrors or reflections in water. She imagined the conversations never had. The embraces never felt the lullabies that had been replaced with other sounds, the laughter that had been silenced by circumstance. Her heart ached with longing and curiosity, with grief and hope all mingled together, a tide pulling her toward truths she was only beginning to understand. And as she held the photo closer, her eyes blurred with tears. She felt a connection so sudden and raw that it left her breathless, like the first time she had ever seen the sky stretch endless above her as a child, the world full of possibilities and secrets, and suddenly one secret had opened the floodgates to all the rest, and she knew nothing would ever be the same again. She whispered a name she had never spoken aloud, as if saying it could summon the woman into her life, or at least bring some clarity to the shadows that had always followed her footsteps. The photo, trembling in her hand, seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if it recognized her as its own. And in that moment she realized the woman in the picture was not just a stranger or a memory, but a part of herself, a hidden fragment, finally revealed a mirror of what had been missing, and everything inside her shifted like the wind turning a page in a story she had been waiting to read, her heart opening wider and wider, until it felt it might burst, and yet at the same time fill completely with a warmth she had never known. And in that warmth, she felt both loss and beginning, both an end and a promise all tangled together, and she sat there in the quiet room with the photo against her chest, knowing that nothing would ever be ordinary again, knowing that life had just tilted on its axis, and everything she thought she knew about family love and herself would have to be rewritten in the light of this discovery. And she whispered again this time, not a name, but a prayer, or a wish, or a vow to find the woman whose smile had been hidden from her for so long, and to understand the story that had been kept from her, and to finally embrace the part of herself that had been waiting in silence all these years. She put the photo down for a moment, but her fingers could not stay away. They kept returning as if drawn by some invisible thread connecting past and present. She imagined the life of the woman in the photo, the laughter and tears, the quiet mornings and restless nights, the choices that had led her father to carry this image in his wallet like a secret treasure hidden from the world, and her mind filled with questions that had no answers. Yet the longing to know them was too strong to resist. She thought about the nights she had lain awake wondering about the pieces of her story that were missing, the half-whispered tales and the silent glances, the stories her father had never told, and now it was all beginning to make sense in fragments and hints, in glimpses through the photograph. She could feel the love that had been there all along, hidden like a river under ice waiting for spring to thaw it. And as she held the photo again, she imagined the sound of the woman's voice, the warmth in her touch, the softness of her hands, and a longing unlike anything she had felt before rose inside her. She wondered if the woman knew about her, if she had ever thought about her at all, or if she had been lost in her own life, carrying burdens and dreams that had kept them apart. And in that wondering there was a sharp ache and a tender hope, both at once, a paradox that made her heart pound and her chest tighten, and she breathed deeply, as if breathing could somehow pull the past into the present. She imagined walking into a room and seeing the woman for the first time, the hesitation, the shock, the recognition in each other's eyes, the stories that would pour out, words tumbling over one another, laughter mingling with tears, and the realization that the world had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the walls to fall and the truth to shine through like light breaking the horizon after a long dark night. She could feel the possibilities stretching out before her, like an endless road lined with unknown faces and new beginnings. And though fear lingered like a shadow at the edge of her heart, the pull of hope was stronger than any hesitation or doubt. And she smiled through the tears, imagining the embrace, the words, the love that had been hidden, and yet was always hers to claim. And as the afternoon sun slanted through the window, touching her hair, her skin, her hands still holding the photo, she felt something shift deep inside, something that told her she was ready to seek the woman, ready to embrace the story, ready to find the parts of herself that had been waiting in silence for so long. And in that readiness she felt a calm, fierce, and tender all at once, a strength she had not known she possessed. And she whispered to the photograph not a question, not a plea, but a promise, a vow to uncover the truth, to honor the past, to connect the threads of her life that had always been fragmented, and to finally see herself whole, reflected in the eyes of the woman who had been missing from her life. And in that whisper, the room seemed to hum with possibility, as if the air itself recognized the weight of what had been discovered and was ready to carry her forward into a story that was hers to write, a story full of love and longing and revelation. A story that would stretch beyond the walls of this quiet room and into the world beyond, a world waiting for her courage, for her discovery, for the unveiling of the truths that would reshape everything she thought she knew about family, about love, about herself. And as she sat there with the fading sunlight brushing against her face and the photograph pressed to her heart, she understood for the first time that some truths are meant to be discovered slowly, and some moments arrive without warning. And this moment, this quiet electric trembling of revelation, was hers to hold and to carry forward, and she would carry it with reverence, with curiosity, with courage, with a fierce, tender joy, and nothing would ever feel ordinary again. And the world beyond the window seemed wider, brighter, filled with possibilities she had never imagined, yet had always known deep inside. And she knew the journey was just beginning, that the woman in the photograph was only the first chapter of a story that would unfold like a river bending through valleys, carrying both sorrow and beauty. And she was ready to follow it wherever it would lead, trusting that the path of discovery would bring her closer to herself and to the love she had always been searching for. And with one last lingering glance at the photograph, she felt a quiet determination rise like a flame inside her, a determination to step into the unknown, to embrace the past and present and future all at once, and to allow herself to finally feel the fullness of life that had been waiting patiently for her all these years. She rose from the edge of the bed, the photo still clutched in her hand, the sunlight fading into shadows across the room, and she felt a sudden pull toward the past, toward the rooms she had never entered, the voices she had never heard, the laughter and tears of a life parallel to her own. She walked slowly to the window, looking out at the street below, the leaves rustling in the wind like whispers from another time, the cars passing like memories she had yet to uncover. And she imagined the woman in the photograph walking beside her in that very street, their hands brushing unknowingly through the air as if fate had been waiting for this moment. All her life she felt a shiver run down her spine, the kind that comes when you realize the world is far bigger and more mysterious than you had ever believed. And she thought about the father who had held this secret so quietly for so long, the man who had loved her, yet protected her from truths that were too heavy for her young heart to bear. And she wondered what conversations had passed behind closed doors, what nights he had lain awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if she would ever know, if she would ever understand the weight of the past, the decisions that had shaped their lives. And she felt a pang of compassion and longing all at once, as if the photograph had unlocked a door inside her that she had not known existed, a door that led to empathy, understanding, and a deeper connection to the people who had given her life and yet had kept her from parts of it. The woman in the photo seemed to gaze back at her with eyes full of questions and answers, eyes that seemed to hold her reflection, and she imagined the stories she could tell if only she had the chance, the laughter, the mistakes, the triumphs and failures, the quiet moments of tenderness and sorrow that had never been shared. And she realized that this photograph was more than just an image. It was a key, a symbol, a bridge between the fragments of her life and the whole she had always been seeking. And she sat again, letting the weight of this realization sink into her chest, the rhythm of her heart matching the rhythm of some unseen current that carried her forward into a story that had been waiting for her to notice it. The world outside seemed quieter now, almost expectant, as if the trees and sky themselves were holding their breath for her next step, and she thought about reaching out, finding the woman, tracing the lines of history and identity, and she felt courage rising from deep within, a courage she had never known existed, a quiet, steady flame that promised to guide her through uncertainty, fear and longing into clarity, understanding and love. And she whispered to herself not a question, but a determination, a commitment to seek the woman, to understand her own history, to embrace the fragments and weave them into something beautiful, whole and new. And as the shadows lengthened in the room and the photograph rested on her lap, she closed her eyes, imagining the moment of meeting, imagining the stories unfolding, the emotions crashing and blending into one another, the love that had been withheld, the love that was always hers. And she felt tears slide down her cheeks, and a strange warmth spread through her chest. And she smiled softly, knowing that this was only the beginning, that the journey ahead would be filled with revelations, connections, heartbreak and joy, all flowing together like a river that could not be contained. And she opened her eyes again, feeling both fragile and powerful, ready to step into a life that had always been waiting for her, ready to embrace truths long hidden, and to finally see the woman who had been part of her from the very beginning. And she rose slowly, holding the photograph close, and stepped toward the door, knowing that the first step was always the hardest and yet the most necessary. And with every step she felt the past and present merging, guiding her toward the person she was always meant to be. And the wind outside whispered through the leaves, carrying with it a promise of discoveries, love and belonging. And she felt herself part of that promise, a living thread woven into the tapestry of lives that had been waiting patiently for her to arrive. And she walked on, ready to meet the woman, ready to meet herself, ready to embrace the story that was hers and hers alone. She stepped out of the house into the cool evening air, the sky painted with hues of orange and purple, and she felt a mixture of fear and anticipation twisting inside her like a river in storm. The photograph clutched tightly in her hand, a talisman guiding her forward. Every step she took seemed to echo in her chest. Every heartbeat, a drum calling her to the unknown. She walked through streets she had never noticed before, the houses familiar yet strange, the lights flickering like tiny beacons of memory, and she imagined the woman somewhere just beyond her reach, living a life full of secrets, stories and laughter, stories she had been denied, yet were hers to claim. And as she moved, she felt her mind wandering through the possibilities, the encounters, the conversations, the revelations, the apologies, the embraces, and the smiles and tears, mingling all at once, forming a tapestry of emotion that seemed too vast to hold yet filled her entirely. And she thought about the father who had carried this secret all these years, the sacrifices he had made, the love he had withheld, not from malice, but from protection, from the burden of truth that he knew would someday reach her anyway. And she felt a sudden surge of empathy and understanding washing over her like a wave, relentless and tender. And she realized that this journey was not just about finding the woman in the photograph. It was about finding herself, understanding her place in the world, the threads that connected her to the past, and the endless possibilities that stretched into the future. And she imagined walking into a room filled with light and warmth and seeing her mother for the first time, the hesitation, the shock, the recognition, the stories spilling over words, tumbling in laughter and tears, the world narrowing down to that single heartbeat that would define everything she had ever known. And she felt a tremor of excitement and fear all at once, a magnetic pull toward the moment she could not yet see, yet could feel pulsating in her chest. And she knew that each step she took was writing a story unseen yet alive inside her. And as the streetlights flickered to life, casting long shadows across the pavement, she felt the weight of the past lighten, as if the universe itself was bending to make space for her discovery. And she thought of the questions she would ask the woman, the truths she would uncover, the memories she would reclaim, the love she would finally recognize. And she let herself imagine the embrace, the warmth, the understanding, the reconciliation, the joy and grief entwined in a dance as old as life itself. And she walked on, feeling the wind in her hair, the soft brush of leaves against her arms, the scent of flowers in gardens unseen, and all of it seemed to conspire to carry her forward to the moment where past, present, and future would collide. And she felt a fierce, tender strength rising in her, a courage born not from certainty, but from the willingness to face whatever truth awaited her. And she whispered softly to herself a vow, a promise, a hope, that she would meet the woman in the photograph with an open heart, ready to forgive, to understand, to love, and to be loved in return. And she felt tears gather in her eyes, the kind that carry both sorrow and joy, as if every step she had ever taken had led to this moment. And she walked faster now, her heartbeat matching the rhythm of some unseen music, the pulse of the world carrying her forward, the roads twisting in anticipation, the shadows stretching and bending, guiding her to the truth she had always sought. And she thought about the lives intertwined with her own, the threads connecting her to people she had never met, the choices that had been made, the stories left untold, the secrets that had shaped her, yet could no longer contain her. And she felt the first spark of something monumental, a realization that life had opened a door and she was stepping through, and the moment was infinite and fragile and beautiful. And she kept walking, knowing that soon she would meet the woman whose eyes would mirror her own, whose hands would speak the language of love she had always known in instinct. And she let herself breathe deeply, letting the anticipation fill every fiber of her being, ready to embrace the journey, ready to embrace the story, ready to embrace herself. She followed the winding roads, past familiar landmarks and streets that seemed ordinary, yet now shimmered with possibility, each step echoing with the weight of questions she had carried silently for years. The photograph pressed against her chest, a constant reminder of the life that had always existed alongside her own, and she imagined the woman in the picture waking up somewhere far away, unaware that her presence had been sought across miles and time, yet somehow the universe had conspired to bring them closer. Together the birds sang in the trees as if narrating a story. Only she could hear the wind brushing against her face, carrying whispers of the past and promises of the future. And she thought about the nights she had spent, wondering if she would ever find answers, if she would ever feel whole, if she would ever touch the pieces of herself that had been hidden in plain sight for so long. And a wave of emotion washed over her, longing, fear, excitement, grief, and joy blending together until her heart felt too full for words. She imagined the moment they would finally meet, the hesitation, the recognition, the stories pouring out, words tumbling over each other, laughter mingling with tears, the warmth of connection, the shiver of understanding. And she felt courage rise like a fire inside her, stronger than doubt, stronger than hesitation, stronger than fear. She walked faster now, the road stretching before her endless, yet guiding her every step, the shadows of the trees long and bending, like the arms of the past reaching toward her, the lights of houses glowing softly in the distance, like beacons calling her forward. And she thought about the father who had carried this secret for so long, the love he had withheld not from malice, but from protection, from fear, from uncertainty. And she felt compassion swelling inside her for him, for the sacrifices, the quiet acts of devotion, the hidden tenderness, the unspoken words. And she realized that this journey was not only about finding the woman in the photograph, it was about reclaiming herself, understanding her place in the world, the threads that connected past, present, and future, weaving them into a tapestry that was hers and hers alone. And she imagined the woman smiling at her for the first time, recognition dawning in her eyes, stories unfolding, embraces spilling over, and she let herself feel it all, the anticipation, the trembling, the hope, the sorrow, and joy entwined in a dance that had begun long before she had even known the story existed. And the air seemed to hum around her, the rustle of leaves, the distant sound of water, the soft creak of gates opening, the world itself breathing along with her, guiding her forward. And she whispered to herself a promise, a vow to meet the woman with an open heart, ready to listen, to understand, to embrace, to love, and to be loved. And she let the tears flow freely, feeling both relief and fear and exhilaration. And as the sky deepened into twilight, stars beginning to twinkle faintly above, she felt the moment stretching infinite and delicate, and she knew that she was ready to step into the story, ready to claim the life that had been waiting for her, ready to meet the woman whose eyes would reflect her own. And in that readiness she felt a strange power, a quiet, fierce tenderness rising in her, a strength born from longing, from hope, from the courage to seek the unknown. And she continued walking, letting the night embrace her, letting the possibilities flow around her like a river she was a part of. And the photograph pressed to her chest seemed to pulse with life, a heartbeat in sync with hers. And she knew that soon the chapters of her life would unfold before her eyes, stories, long hidden stories waiting to be told. And she felt a shiver of anticipation, the world holding its breath, the moment approaching, the encounter, inevitable yet miraculous. And she breathed deeply, letting the wind carry away doubt, fear, hesitation, letting only hope, courage, and longing remain, filling her entirely. And she walked on with steady steps, feeling the pulse of life guiding her toward a future she had always imagined. And the moment she would meet the woman in the photograph drew closer, each step a beat in the story of discovery, love, and belonging that was hers to claim. And she let herself feel ready to embrace everything, and nothing would ever feel ordinary again. She reached the small house at the edge of the street, the porch lights glowing softly like a quiet invitation, her heart pounding in her chest, every beat echoing with the years of longing. Questions unspoken, tears shed in silence. The photograph still clutched in her hand, a bridge between past and present. And she paused for a moment, taking a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill her lungs, the scent of flowers drifting from a garden unseen, the distant hum of life moving on around her. And she imagined opening the door, stepping inside, seeing the woman from the photograph standing there, the recognition dawning in her eyes, the stories spilling through the silence, the warmth of connection that had been waiting for decades. And she felt her chest tighten with anticipation and fear and hope all at once, the weight of all the years and secrets pressing down and yet lifting her up at the same time. And she stepped forward, the floor creaking beneath her feet, the walls holding the quiet whispers of lives lived and lost. And she felt courage rising like a tide within her, a strength she had never known yet had always carried in her soul. The door opened before her as if the world itself acknowledged her arrival. And there she was, the woman whose eyes held the reflection of her own, the hands that had unknowingly shaped her DNA reaching out. And she felt the world tilt a moment, infinite and delicate, as if time itself had slowed to allow this encounter, this meeting, this revelation to unfold fully. And she smiled, through the tears, the photograph trembling in her hand like a heartbeat in sync with hers. And the woman smiled back, recognition, awe, relief, and joy mingling in a single glance. And she felt the flood of emotions wash over her, the longing, the grief, the love, the questions, the laughter and tears, all colliding in a storm that left her breathless, yet strangely calm. And she stepped closer, her hands reaching instinctively toward the woman whose presence had been missing, yet always known. And there, fingers brushed, tentative at first, then with certainty, as if the universe had been orchestrating this touch for decades. And she felt the past melt into the present, the years of absence falling away like autumn leaves carried by the wind. And she whispered a name, not a question, not a plea, but a recognition, a greeting, an acknowledgement of the life that had been hidden and now revealed. And the woman embraced her tenderly, the warmth of her body, the softness of her voice, the quiet strength that had been waiting to hold her. And she felt every moment of longing, every silent tear, every unanswered question find its place in that embrace, as if the universe had been waiting for this reconciliation, this recognition, this healing. And they pulled back slightly, their eyes locking, and stories began to flow, words tumbling over one another, laughter mingling with tears, confessions of fear and hope, of love lost and found, of choices made and unmade, of regrets and promises. And she listened, absorbing every detail, every nuance, every heartbeat, every sigh, and she felt the threads of her own life weaving into the tapestry of hers. And the woman spoke of love kept hidden of sacrifices, made of longing, endured of moments of weakness and moments of courage, and she realized that all along the love had been there, quietly, waiting patiently to be claimed, to be recognized, to be felt in full. And she shared her own stories, her own fears, her own triumphs, her own griefs, her own dreams, her own discoveries, and the woman listened, the eyes never leaving hers, the hands never letting go. And she felt the past and present collide, a fusion of emotion so intense, yet tender, so overwhelming, yet comforting that it left her trembling, and yet steady, a grounding in the knowledge that she was finally whole, a part of a story bigger than herself, a life shared and acknowledged. And she laughed and cried all at once. The sound of release, the sound of reunion, the sound of love finally recognized, and they embraced again, longer this time, letting the silence speak the words too heavy to speak aloud, yet understood fully in the language of presence and connection. And she felt a peace settle over her, a quiet, fierce tenderness that told her she was exactly where she was meant to be. And in that moment she understood the meaning of family, of love, of belonging, of self-discovery. And the photograph, now lying forgotten on the table, seemed to pulse gently, as if satisfied that the bridge had served its purpose. The journey completed the story, unfolding into the next chapter, not yet written but already begun. And she held her mother's hand, feeling the warmth, the life, the heartbeat of a story restored, and she whispered softly to herself and to her mother that this was only the beginning, the start of shared days, nights, conversations, laughter, tears, dreams, and memories. A life reclaimed, a love realized, and she felt herself smiling through tears, through laughter, through relief, through awe, and the world outside seemed softer, quieter, yet full of infinite possibilities. The stars twinkling faintly above the rooftops, the wind carrying the scent of flowers and hope, and she knew that she would never be the same again, that everything had shifted, that every step from now on would carry the weight and the beauty of discovery, of love, of family, of self. And she felt courage rise once more, a steady flame ready to guide her through every tomorrow with grace, strength, and tenderness. And she knew that in this moment, in this embrace, in this recognition, she had found not only her mother but herself, whole and complete, and nothing would ever feel ordinary again. She held her mother's hand, a quiet, steady warmth flowing between them, a bond unbroken yet newly discovered. And she felt the years of longing, grief, and unanswered questions dissolve like mist in the morning sun. The photograph that had begun this journey lay forgotten, yet honored. A symbol of the past, now fully reconciled, and she smiled through tears, the sound of laughter mingling with quiet sobs, a melody of release and reunion, the air around them thick with love, understanding, and unspoken promises. And she realized that the journey had not only reunited them, it had revealed herself every hidden fragment, every silent yearning, every quiet hope, every shadow of doubt, now woven together into a whole and complete tapestry of identity and connection. And they embraced, again longer this time, letting the world outside fall away, the weight of years lifting from their shoulders, replaced with light warmth and belonging. And she whispered softly to her mother, words unneeded yet spoken anyway, a vow, a recognition, a promise to honor this love, to nurture this connection, to cherish every moment yet to come. And her mother's eyes glimmered with tears and a quiet smile, and she felt a sense of peace, unlike anything she had known before. A fierce, tender calm that promised that life would never be ordinary again. And as they pulled back slightly, their eyes locking, recognition, awe, and gratitude filling every glance, she understood that some truths are meant to be discovered at the perfect time. Some moments arrive to heal and transform, and she felt herself standing taller, breathing deeper, feeling stronger and softer at once, ready to embrace the life restored before her, ready to carry the story forward. And as night settled outside, stars twinkling faintly above the rooftops, the air carrying the scent of flowers and possibility, she knew that love, family, and self had been found, not lost but waiting patiently. and she smiled one last time in the quiet room, feeling the heartbeat of discovery, of reunion, of belonging flowing through her every cell. And she whispered to herself and to the universe that this was the beginning of everything she had been waiting for. A life full of connection, warmth, understanding, joy, and love. And in that final moment she felt whole, complete, and infinite, and nothing would ever feel ordinary again.